She laughed when she said it, loud enough for the whole table to hear. Maybe next time. David, you should pick a place that actually fits your paycheck. Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. Before I tell you how that night changed everything, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? It started like any other Friday evening. The restaurant was one of those places where the menu doesn't show prices, just market value. Candlelight flickered off polished glasses, waiters glided by like dancers, and the sound of laughter bounced between marble walls. My wife, Linda, sat across from me, radiant, confident, too aware of how the world looked at her. She thrived in these circles, surrounded by people who used words like networking instead of friendship. Her friends, the ones she called my successful circle, were already 2 bottles of Chardonnay deep, gossiping about vacation homes and new cars. I sat quietly, smiling when appropriate, playing my part as the supportive husband. I didn't mind. I wasn't ashamed of who I was, an operations manager, solid income, not flashy. But for Linda, appearances mattered more than peace. When the check arrived, the air shifted. The waiter placed the black leather folder between us. I reached for it, but Linda beat me to it. She opened it, saw the number, then smirked. "Sweetheart," she said, just loud enough for the table to catch every word. "Maybe next time you should choose a place that suits your salary." Laughter rippled around the table. One of her friends even snorted wine through her nose. Linda leaned back, basking in her little victory that I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. For a split second, her smile faltered. Barely, but I saw it. Then I took out my card, placed it on the tray, and nodded to the waiter in scene. No argument. Just silence. The ride home was wordless. She hummed along to the radio, pretending nothing happened. I stared out the window, city lights reflecting in the glass, thinking about how respect dies, not in explosions, but in moments like this. Quiet, public, intentional. That night, while she scrolled through her phone in bed, laughing at some group chat, I sat in the dark living room. My mind wasn't racing. It was calm. Too calm. I realized something. When a person shows you who they really are, believe them. And in that silence, I decided I didn't shout. I didn't plan revenge. I just began to live differently. If she wanted me to act my wage, I would. Exactly that. The next morning, I told her I'd be working late for a few weeks. She barely looked up from her coffee. "Don't overdo it," she said, scrolling through her phone. "They're not going to pay you more just because you work yourself to death." Maybe not, I thought. But they would notice that at work, I focused like never before. Projects that had been dragging for months started to move. I stayed after hours, not for overtime, for precision. Numbers, logistics, efficiency. My world made sense when everything else didn't. My boss noticed. People started asking for my input. But at home, things got quieter. Linda's tone sharpened. "You're distant," she'd say. Or, "Are you avoiding me?" Maybe I was. Maybe the noise around her just didn't fit my peace anymore. Every night, I'd lie awake listening to the soft hum of her phone lighting up beside her. Her world, parties, friends, appearances, kept spinning. Mine had gone still, deliberate. And yet, beneath that calm, something was shifting, something she couldn't see. Because when someone mocks your worth, the best answer isn't words. It's value. And I was about to show her mine, in ways she'd never forget. The morning after that dinner, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. For years, I'd been chasing balance, trying to keep her happy, my boss impressed, the bills paid, the house standing. But now, for the first time, I stopped trying to prove anything. I showed up at work before sunrise, long before the parking lot filled. There's a certain peace in those empty hours. The smell of fresh coffee, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the sound of your own footsteps echoing through quiet hallways. I buried myself in work. While others were thinking about happy hour, I was rewriting logistics systems, catching errors, finding money the company didn't even know it was losing. My boss, Mark, started stopping by my office more often. "You're on fire lately," he said one night, half joking, half curious. I shrugged it off. I didn't tell him that my fuel came from humiliation, that I replayed that dinner over and over in my mind until the laughter became white noise. Meanwhile, at home, things changed. Linda started buying more, new dresses, new perfumes, dinners with her friends. I didn't question it. I just smiled, paid what I could, and said nothing. She seemed almost disappointed that I wasn't fighting. One night, she said, "You don't even try to keep up anymore." I looked up from my laptop and said quietly, "You told me to act my wage." She blinked, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. She turned away, muttering something about me being passive-aggressive. But the truth was, I had stopped reacting. I was building. I spent every waking hour improving systems, streamlining operations, saving the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. Numbers don't lie, and neither does silence. Then, about a month later, my boss called me into his office. "Close the door," he said. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You've been carrying this place," he said. "Corporate's been watching. They want to restructure. And they want you to take over as CFO." I stared at him. "CFO?" I repeated. He nodded. "It's time. You've earned it." I walked out of that office with a calm I can't describe. Not pride, clarity. That night, I came home to an empty living room. Linda was out again, dinner with her friends. The same ones who had laughed. I sat on the couch and thought about that moment at the restaurant. The way her words had cut through me, the laughter that followed. And I realized something. She didn't just mock my paycheck. She mocked my worth. So I decided to stop pretending. I walked into our bedroom, opened my closet, and started packing. Shirts, suits, the watch my father gave me when I got my first job, everything went into 2 suitcases. I didn't take the things she'd bought or anything that wasn't mine. I wasn't leaving in anger. I was leaving in truth. On the kitchen table, I left a single note. It read, "You told me to act my wage. I finally am. And I can't afford a life built on appearances." I left the keys beside it and walked out. No dramatic exit, no confrontation. Just the sound of the door closing behind me. I checked into a small apartment near the office. A simple place, clean, quiet. I slept better than I had in years. When she came home that night, I imagined she stood in that empty bedroom, confused at first, then maybe angry, maybe scared, but I wasn't there to see it. I didn't block her number. I didn't text. I just disappeared from her routine. A few days later, I got an email. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. I wasn't cruel. I was done. At work, things moved fast. New title, new office, new responsibilities. People looked at me differently. I had authority now. But even with all that, I didn't feel the need to show off. I wore the same suits, drove the same car. The difference wasn't in how I looked. It was in how I stood. There's a strange freedom that comes when you stop performing for people who never saw your value in the first place. Every time I passed by the mirror, I barely recognized the man looking back. Not because I had changed, but because I had finally stopped hiding. I didn't know if Linda was still in that house, still telling the same stories to her friends. I didn't care. The man she used to laugh at had become someone else entirely. Someone who didn't need to prove his worth over dinner. Someone who no longer needed to explain his silence. And deep down, I knew that silence would be the thing she remembered most. 2 weeks passed before I saw her again. I was at a conference downtown, surrounded by people in suits and name badges, the kind of place Linda used to dream of being seen. The company had sponsored the event, and as the new CFO, I was expected to give a short talk. I stood backstage, waiting for my turn, listening to the host introduce the next panelist, when I saw her across the lobby. She was with another man, tall, slick, expensive. She hadn't seen me yet. I watched her laugh, that same polished laugh she used at dinners, the one that never reached her eyes. For a moment, it felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing her face. When I stepped onto the stage 15 minutes later, the crowd applauded politely. I spoke about leadership, accountability, value, the things that had built me back up after she tried to tear me down. I didn't mention her, of course, but every word came from that night. When I walked off, she was standing by the exit. "David," she said, as if she couldn't believe I existed outside her orbit. "I didn't know you were here." I smiled, calm, collected. "I work for the company hosting it," I said. She blinked, trying to process it. "You work for them?" she asked. I nodded. "Actually, I help run it." Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. The man beside her shifted, sensing something he couldn't name. "Excuse me," she said to him. "I'll catch up." He left reluctantly. She turned back to me. "You disappeared," she said. "You left everything." "No," I replied. "I left appearances. There's a difference." She folded her arms, trying to regain control. "You think walking away made you noble?" You embarrassed me, David. Do you know what people said when they found out you left? I looked at her and said softly, probably the same people who laughed when you told me to act my wage. The color drained from her face. The noise around us seemed to fade. That was a joke, she said quickly. You're still hung up on that. I tilted my head. No, I said, I'm grateful for it. She frowned. Grateful? You gave me clarity, I said. I stopped chasing approval. I stopped apologizing for being who I am. I built something real. She looked away, then back at me, her tone softening. David, I didn't mean to. Look, we both said things. Maybe we could. Linda, I interrupted gently. You didn't just say things. You showed me who you were, and I finally believed you. She blinked fast, trying to keep her composure. You think you've changed? She said. You still sound the same. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but you don't make me small anymore. She didn't respond. Her hands trembled slightly, clutching her designer purse like a lifeline. The man she'd been with reappeared, tapping her shoulder. Ready? He asked. She nodded without looking at him. You're doing well then? She asked, forcing casualness. Better than ever, I said. And you? She hesitated. Things are fine. Her voice wavered. I nodded once, then turned to leave. Take care, Linda. As I walked away, I could feel her staring after me. Not angry, not smug, just quiet. And I realized something right there in that lobby. Silence wasn't revenge. It was release. I didn't need her to see my success. I didn't even need her to regret it. The satisfaction came from knowing that I had rebuilt everything she thought she destroyed, and more. That night, after the event, I went back to my apartment, sat on the balcony, and looked out at the city. The skyline glowed, steady and endless. I thought about the version of myself who sat in that restaurant, humiliated, shrinking while others laughed. That man was gone. The new one had learned that dignity doesn't shout. It simply stands. The next morning, I got an email from HR. They wanted me to represent the company at an upcoming corporate gala. Black tie, the note said. Bring a guest if you'd like. I stared at that line for a long time. Bring a guest. I smiled to myself, remembering the laughter, the candlelight, the sound of my card hitting the tray. This time, the table would look a little different. The next few days passed quickly. Work, meetings, calls, plans. But under it all was a quiet anticipation. Not revenge. Closure. I didn't know what I'd say if I saw her again. Maybe nothing at all. Sometimes, silence finishes the story better than words ever could. The night of the gala arrived like something out of a different life. The hotel ballroom shimmered with golden light, the air heavy with perfume and conversation. Every table glittered with crystal glasses and folded napkins shaped like crowns. It was the kind of place Linda used to dream of being invited to, the kind of event she thought measured success. I walked in wearing a black tuxedo, the kind that fits not just the body but the moment. The band played softly in the background as people greeted each other with smiles that never quite reached their eyes. My assistant, Claire, walked beside me. She was sharp, confident, and kind in a way that never needed to be loud. When I introduced her to a few board members, she shook their hands and smiled with quiet grace. I could feel eyes on us as we moved through the crowd. It was strange being the one others looked toward instead of through. I didn't crave attention, but I understood now that respect carries its own kind of gravity. Halfway through the evening, while I was speaking with the CEO, I felt a shift in the room. A hush rippled through one corner, followed by whispers. I turned and saw her, Linda. She stood near the entrance, wearing a silver dress, stunning as always, but with something missing behind her eyes. Her companion from the conference wasn't there. She hesitated before walking toward me. Claire noticed first. Is that your wife? She asked quietly. I corrected. Linda reached us, her smile small, unsure. David, she said softly, I didn't know you'd be here. I met her gaze evenly. It's a company event, I said. I helped organize it. The words seemed to hit her like small waves, one after another. I see, she murmured. You've really moved up. Claire excused herself politely to greet someone across the room, leaving us standing in a pool of awkward silence. Linda looked around. You belong here now, she said. More than I ever did. I didn't answer. I just let her speak. I tried to build something new, she continued. After you left, I thought I'd find someone who could give me more. Turns out, more isn't always better. Her voice cracked slightly, but she recovered fast. I made mistakes, she said. But you could have talked to me instead of walking away. I studied her face, the same one I used to know so well, and felt something unexpected. Peace. I did talk, I said finally. Just not in words you wanted to hear. You told me to act my wage, so I did. I stopped living for someone else's idea of enough. She looked down, her eyes glistening. You really hate me for that. I shook my head. No. You helped me understand what I value. I just wish it hadn't cost both of us so much to learn it. For a moment, she didn't speak. The band started playing a slow tune, the kind couples usually dance to. Around us, laughter swelled again, but she and I stood still, two ghosts from different worlds sharing the same air. Are you happy? She asked finally. I thought about it. Happiness felt like too simple a word for what I'd become. I'm grounded, I said, and that's better than happy. She smiled faintly, a sad kind of smile. She seems nice, she said, nodding toward Claire. She is, I replied. She listens. The words hung between us like a quiet verdict. Linda nodded slowly. You always wanted peace, she said. I just didn't understand what it cost. Peace doesn't cost, I said. It pays. The CEO called my name from across the room. I turned to go, but she stopped me with one last question. David, she said, if you could go back, would you still leave? I met her eyes and said, the man who left wouldn't have stayed, and the man who stayed wouldn't have become who I am now. I walked away without looking back. Later that night, after the speeches and toasts, I stepped outside to the terrace for some air. The city stretched out below, alive and endless. Claire joined me, handing me a glass of champagne. You were incredible tonight, she said. I smiled. It's strange, I said. You think revenge will feel like fire. But it's quiet. It's peace. She raised her glass. To peace then. We clinked glasses softly, and for the first time in years, I felt entirely free. Somewhere behind us, the ballroom doors opened. I turned just enough to see Linda standing alone inside, watching the crowd that no longer revolved around her. Her reflection caught in the glass for a moment before fading into the movement behind it. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel triumph. I felt closure. When the night ended, I left the gala not as the man who had been laughed at, but as the man who had learned that silence is louder than applause. And maybe that's the real meaning of acting your wage, living within the value you know you've earned, not the one someone else tries to assign you. If you felt this story hit somewhere deep, don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop a comment. Tell me, what does acting your wage mean to you?